the March, and we are now several months into this global crisis. Last night at 8:30, remarkable. An address to the nation by Boris Johnson, our Prime Minister, saying things that I doubt he ever thought he would have to do, almost taking us to wartime curfews. Effectively, he's announced a total lockdown of the country. You can only leave your houses with 4 good reasons. And actually, in terms of exercise, shopping, maximum you can leave at your house is 1 time every day. So it was a big historic moment. It was watched unbelievably across television platforms by 27 million people, and goodness knows how many more listened to various radio stations as well. I thought the Prime Minister looked pretty grim, looked pretty scared, actually, and I guess that's right. There is a lot to be scared about, but at least he has finally caught up with the sheer gravity of the situation. And yet, this morning, government policy and leadership descended into complete and utter farce. I was invited on to Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan and others this morning. Before I was on, we had Michael Gove appearing for the government, caught in complete knots over construction workers. How could people working on construction sites practice social distancing? And he kind of said, well, if they're working outside, maybe they can stay a couple of arms lengths apart, but maybe if they're working internally in people's houses, the rules would be different. And it was pretty clear that he was making it up on the hoof. He didn't really know what the government policy was. And then he got completely caught out by a question that I guess would have been very predictable and applies to millions and millions of us. And it's this: unfortunately, in the world in which we live, many mothers and fathers are separated, and children under 18 children will spend most of their lives with one parent. The question to Michael Gove was, could those children move from one parent to another? And I'm not saying it was the easiest question to answer, but surely it's something that all those very clever people in Number 10 must have thought about. Michael Gove said no, that wouldn't be possible. And when that was met with an outrage of protest, within half an hour, he put out a clarification statement saying, actually, with children under 18, it would be possible for them to move between lockdown house and lockdown house so that they could see both of their parents. Just a feeling that somehow events are leading the government rather than government leading events. And that took us on to the scenes this morning on the London Underground. I could not believe the photographs I was seeing this morning coming in from Canning Town, coming in from West Ham, and that was on the platforms, where they were packed 7 or 8 deep and clearly would have to wait for several trains for those at the back to even get on. Then various pictures posted online of conditions on the Underground. Well, that was the rush hour. And yet, do you know something? I've just been looking at some lunchtime footage of major Underground lines in London, and they're still jam-packed at lunchtime. Social distancing, well, there are several people within the 2-metre sphere that this government has set us. So well done, Sadiq Khan. Well done, the Mayor of London. Brilliant. Genius. Closed dozens of our tube stations, cut back the services to make sure that social distancing, even for those performing essential services, is completely and utterly impossible. If this virus is as easily spread as we're given to believe, what is happening in London right now is a complete, total, and utter disaster. Now, I said yesterday that lots of neighbours of mine in this part of the world had been behaving really well, looking after elderly neighbours, making sure they're okay, having a chance to chat with them in the garden at a safe distance. And indeed, I've been out talking to some people in their 90s who, very, very difficult for them, the thought of being stuck on their own for 12 weeks. Luckily, the ones that I've all spoken to have already been catered for by friends and family in terms of shopping and provisions. But as I said yesterday, A crisis brings out the very best and the very worst in people. And we have seen wholesale abuse of the fact that schools will continue to take the children of essential workers. Beauticians dropping off their children at school, claiming that they are essential workers. No, they're not. They're just plain damned selfish. But when you look at the gravity of that broadcast at 8:30 last night, without doubt, the most significant broadcast by a prime minister in this country since 1940. When you look at that, and then you see the farce, the descent into farce this morning, with Michael Gove completely incapable of answering questions and then changing his mind. You look at what's been happening on the London Underground, some of our train services, and goodness knows what's happening at our airports. But I did this morning read this in the Daily Telegraph, and I could actually scarcely believe it. Dear sir, we were repatriated to Heathrow on Thursday, March the 18th, from MS Braemar in Cuba. That's a cruise ship. We had no checks on passengers on disembarking the ship, in boarding the aeroplane, or on arrival at Heathrow. We were then bussed to Manchester Airport, another 3.5-hour journey in close contact with fellow coughing passengers, and then allowed to travel home with the advice that we ought to self-isolate. Social distancing was to be followed, but many passengers on the Braemar seemed to think this simply didn't apply to them. No wonder the virus is spreading when 600 passengers simply get off a ship and nothing is done. And that was written by Dr. John Davis from Morpeth in Northumberland. Compare that to people coming back, nearly 2 months ago from a cruise ship in Japan, from those that were flown back in Wuhan, when even before this was a serious problem, were taken into quarantine. We are not even temperature checking people at the airports. And we're told, oh, well, don't worry, it doesn't really matter. It's not actually a problem because, sometimes people won't yet have developed the symptoms. Do you know, a friend of mine was in Singapore on business, essential business, a couple of weeks ago. He said he must have been checked 10 times in the 3 days that he was there. And you know, the Singapore government send an email every morning to every citizen living in that country, updating them on the coronavirus crisis, what they're doing, and what they as citizens need to do. Similarly, in South Korea, whose initial outbreak was far worse than ours is. And if we believe the numbers, they've managed to get this in check. Yeah, they've been rigorous. They found out where infected people were. They followed their mobile phone records and been able to put together a map of those people, those infected with COVID-19, have been in touch with. So there are around the world 1 or 2 success stories of where governments have managed to slow the spread. We've not yet had the updated figure on those infected and confirmed in this country. It was up 17% yesterday, and deaths now into the 300s. We are absolutely mirroring the appalling things that have happened in Italy. We're just 2 weeks behind. We're told constantly that the government is following the science. Really? You see, the science, the one consensus I can pick up from across the world with the science, World Health Organization, many other governments, the science says testing, testing, testing. You test people, you find out who's got this thing, you isolate them. And then in time, when it's developed and ready, you have the antibody test, and you can find out those who've been through it, come out the other side and are immune to it. I mean, believe you me, if I get this thing and I come out the other side and I'm okay and I'm immune, I'll want to volunteer to go out and help. I can drive something, I can, push a trolley around a hospital or whatever it may be. We would be able to re-engage and muck in and help in the crisis. But at the moment, our testing regime is so catastrophic, I doubt one of you would have a clue where to go and get tested where you live. The reason is there frankly almost isn't anywhere. You get tested when you've been taken in a hospital and you're in a serious condition. And I'll finish on this last point. I know there are 7,000 doctors and nurses, retired, who've left the National Health Service, who have been called back to the colours. They volunteered to go back and help in this crisis. That takes real courage. That takes real guts. I spoke to a hospital this morning in the south of England where they told me the testing facilities are so poor, we're not even able to test NHS workers. So my thoughts and my heart go out to all of those brave men and women dealing with this crisis. They are being badly let down by a government that has had 2 months' notice that something really bad was going to happen. So I say this to Matthew Hancock, Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, and all those frightfully clever people in Downing Street. Get a grip. We've got to start testing in this country. We've got to find out who's got this virus. That really is the way we'll stop an absolutely disastrous spread. Thank you.